Discussi there. Welcome to our late night book discussion about The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolvr. Tonight we'll be discussing how the theme and the motif in the novel is heavily supported by feminism. Macey?
There are many subtopics with feminism, and the first one being Taylor's role at her hospital job. We may refer to Jacob for that quote.
Now, throughout the entire book, you can see that there's heavy feminist views, and it's from the viewpoint of a woman, our main character, Taylor. She was a phlebotomist at the hospital where she used to work, and here's a quote. Here's what it says. "I did inquire there about work, but the head man in a white coat and puckery white loafers looked me over and said, 'Are you a licensed phlebotomist in the state of Arizona?'" Kind of explaining how he was wary of whether or not she was actually a licensed phlebotomist, whether she did what she worked at was actually the field she should have been in. Probably, most likely, because she was a female, he was prejudging her. And throughout the novel, several men will act this way. Even Angel, who seems to be a dominant male in the relationship with Luann and Angel. He seems to be the dominant type. And throughout the novel, you see things like this where the males will be a little bit more judgmental about where the women's place in the society is.
And you can even find that with Angel and Luann at one point felt that she was needed to stay with Angel, but after a while the feminism showed where she no longer felt like she needed to be with him because she could live on her own and work with her own capabilities.
Right, and you can see that phlebotomist is not exactly what you would consider a traditional female job to be, right? Usually it's a nurse or something inside of a hospital, if you're thinking a nurse or something along that lines, where she was looking at red blood cells under a microscope, and she was actually doing research and studying, and she would help the doctors, but she was not a nurse. So that's kind of a strong point to feminism, that the gender role does not decide the job that she's in.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so.
Yeah.
Next point.
All right. Another point is that she was not pregnant and married off, as typical people were. And so a quote that we found in the novel was, "Mama always said that barefoot and pregnant was not my style." And this is on page 4. And we found this as being very, very important, because as most women, they find that they feel that they need to be married in order to do any sort of amazing thing in life, or to be able to survive on their own, or survive in general, because they can't survive on their own. And so her doing this was a very feminist statement.
Especially from Kentucky, where she was from, you can see everybody was being, if you got pregnant, you were married off to the, whoever you got pregnant or whoever you got pregnant with, and that's how it was, and you were no longer an individual, you were of an item with them, and in some cases it even felt like you were an object to them. Mm-hmm. And so these young females were being, their lives were being taken away, but Taylor was the exception in her small town in which she left the town and became on her own.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to add, Jared?
No.
Okay.
He's good.
All right. So our next topic is the fact that she went out on her own, and she decided to pursue a life on her own and find her own way and find something that was comfortable for her. And so that quote can be found on page 11. And it states, "When I drove out over the Pittman line," which is just showing when she first decided to go out on her own. And she wanted to make a major change with this statement. She wanted to change her name as well as her life. And so, yeah, if you'd like to add to that in any way.
Yeah. Usually this is not this takes place during the later 70s, early 80s, yeah. And it's specifically 1970. It's 70 after 1975, and then years after that. And during this time period, this was not really common for females to leave their small town all by themselves and go out and get jobs for themselves and then try to self-sustain. That's usually not what ends up happening. they're seen as either you get like a job in teaching and you have a husband who also supports, and it's not a fair wage, yet Taylor takes off on her own, takes up Turtle, it raises her, and becomes both the father and the mother for Turtle, since usually it's seen as a household has two heads of the family.
Which also adds to her not becoming pregnant and married off, because if she would have been pregnant and married off, she would have been stuck in that town with somebody else being the item that would have claimed her as being.
Right.
And so it helped her to be able to go out on her own. And so it's just kind of her feministic mind allowed her to continue to be a feminist.
It's more focused on, it is feminist, but it is individualism in a sense, because she's not playing the gender role, but she's also on her own until she meets Luann, at least, and then they become a family of sorts, which is general-wise, usually for a family you have a patriarch, which is the father, then you have the maternal figure, who is the mother, then you have either a son or daughter. But that's not what happened at all here. You had Taylor, who might have played a role as a patriarch slightly, maybe slightly, if you found the quote where she came home and Luann was cooking and Taylor saw herself sitting down watching TV while Luann would be cooking.
Yeah.
And in traditional sense, you see a father coming home to watch TV while the mother is cooking. So you can see that she kind of switches the roles from what's traditional in a way.
With what you were saying about her being more of an individual than feminist in that sort of matter, I guess you can kind of say that she was a 7 on the pH scale.
A 7 on the pH scale?
Solid neutral.
Yeah, exactly. However, the entire book is heavily themed, and it's called a motif within feminism, but under that you can see it's individualism and how the gender roles within the society can easily be broken from what we traditionally feel is the correct way to do things, or what society deems as the correct way to do things.
And since you kind of touched on a little bit, I guess we can move to the next topic of Taylor coming home to Luann and her being in the kitchen, having that. And Jared has a quote for that.
On page 113, Taylor says, "The idea of Luann reading magazines for child-raising tips and recipes, and me coming home grouchy after a hard day's work. We were like some family on a TV commercial with names like Myrtle and Fred. I could just hear a striking up conversation about air fresheners."
Yeah. So, it's a funny little anecdote and insight to how Taylor feels about this situation. But in the end, you can see, at the end of the novel, you see that it works out for the best for most of the characters. So.
Well, it's what united them as a family.
Right, united them as a family.
Which leads into another theme that we won't touch on too.
They share many hardships as well, and they, without exactly relying on any males, there are no males that they rely on. They are able to be self-sufficient and perfectly fine, disproving the fact that there's even a need for a male in a what we deem as a family. So, yeah.
Next topic. The next topic that shows her feminist side is that she was, or feminism side, is that she was both mother and father. She played both roles. And so it kind of showed that it was an unconventional household. And that can be found on page 232, if I grab my book. And it states... Yep, right here. States, "It didn't seem to matter to Turtle. She was happy where she was. The sky went from dust color to gray, and the cool black sparked with the stars. And she was still wide awake. She watched the dark highway and entertained me with her vegetable soup song. Except that now there were people mixed in with beans and potatoes. Dwayne Ray, Maddie, Esperanza, Luann, and all the rest. And me. I was the main ingredient." And so...
So she sees herself as kind of she is the center of the story, and also the center of the family in a lot of ways, that the patriarch is seen as the center of in a traditional family. So that and the story.
She was basically the link between all of them, because Luann wouldn't have really ever encountered Esperanza and Esteban if she wouldn't have ever met Taylor,
Right.
because Taylor worked at the tire store, which all connected them all together.
Right, and most situations you found that Taylor was taking charge of the situation, leading. It was most of her ideas. I mean, she was scared. The decisions she was making, she didn't know if it was the right one or wrong one, but she was making them, and most of the characters saw her as kind of like a leader or some sort of figure that they could follow, and that her ideas were doing things, and she was brave. So,
which even adds on to another quality that could be related to the topic, which is leadership.
right.
Because typically the leader is the patriarch of the family, and Taylor takes complete leadership control throughout the story, and so yeah.
So that covers most of the topics that we have today, if I'm right. Do we have any more?
I believe that's most of them, unless we're short on time.
I don't think we are. So
We have another one.
you have another one?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Alright, so there was another incident where Taylor would not stand for having to dry clean her uniform, and that can be referred to Jared, and he has a quote for that.
Right.
And this was a very important part of the story, because it just her taking the stand. Most people like Luann, she would just let things pass over for a while, and she wouldn't take charge for them or the fact that it bothered her in any sort of manner. And so this was her standing up for herself and being strong in her will, which isn't typically a female characteristic. So Jared, your quote?
On page 90, Taylor is narrating, and she says, "After 6 days, the Burger Derby manager, Jerry Speller, this little twerp who believes the responsibility of running a burger joint puts you a heartbeat away from the emperor of the universe, said I didn't have the right attitude and told him he was exactly right. I said I had to confess I didn't have proper reverence for the Burger Derby institution, and to prove it I threw my hat into the mighty mister and turned it on." And then later on it says, "The fight had been about the uniform. The shorts weren't actually plastic, it turned out, but a cotton polyester that needed to be dry cleaned. $3.25 an hour plus salary, and you're supposed to pay for dry cleaning your own shorts." So this is saying that Taylor stood up for what she believed was wrong, and she...
Or believe what she
what
stood
she
up for what
believed
she
what
was
she was
right.
right.
Yeah.
What should be right.
Mhm.
But yes, and this is often, usually in stories throughout, the hero, we went over the hero thesis about, story about her, whoever the hero is going throughout a story, figuring out who they are, and slaying the monster or metaphorical monsters. Usually it's a male that we're following or readers connect to.
Mm-hmm.
And even though most of we were reading it, I'm not a female, I feel like I can still connect to her, because she stands up for what is right, and it also feels like it's a hero type story where she's developing a character and going through this adventure throughout America. So gender roles, basically what we've overviewed is that your gender does not dictate your value or importance in society or what job you can do.
Exactly.
Even in a time period where male dominance was definitely there. It's definitely there, yes. So, is that all?
I believe that could be all.
So I guess I'll just play us out again.
Alright.
Play our outro. See you on the next late night book discussion. I don't know what we're going to be talking about, but we will talk about something.
Featuring Macey, Jared, and Jacob.
That was beautiful and ready.
It's not 14 minutes long.